Hello, Wisconsin. Welcome to the September 6th, Wednesday edition of As Goes Wisconsin. I am Kristen Bry, and today I want to start with talking about a tale of two impeachments. One having to do with Texas, and one having to do in Wisconsin. And they're very different because Greg Bach on the board. What do you feel like impeachments should be reserved for?
They should, first of all, good morning.
Good morning.
They should be reserved for those who have committed or are alleged to have been committed egregious offenses to their offices or to society that have evidence and
Evidence?
evidently evidence and things of that nature, and go forward with a lot of confidence that we know, hey, this individual did X, Y, and Z, so we're going to do A, B, and C to make sure that they are taken out of office in a prompt and judicious fashion.
Yeah, that was a good answer.
Thank you.
So let's start with our southern border in Texas. Because yesterday, the impeachment trial of Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton began. And this is after he's already been impeached he is a Republican, and he has been impeached by a Republican-led state house on charges of bribery, obstruction to justice, and misuse of funds. And so this is he's a firebrand conservative Republican. He's aligned himself with Donald Trump. So there could be some politics at play, but objectively, this guy has done crimes. Like, he has actually been a part of corruption and crimes, and he's been suspended from his duties since he is impeached since May. And so he's been the scandals include he remains under indictment on securities fraud charges. He faces an additional federal investigation after former staffers accused him of accepting bribes and abusing his office. It was his request for a $3.3 million in state funds for a settlement with those whistleblowers that prompted the state House GOP to impeach Paxton in a 121-23 vote. And so, like, there is a lot here when we're talking about the impeachment case that's happening in Texas.
It's a beefy case.
It's a beefy case. There's, guy's done some things wrong. Versus the threat of impeachment that is happening in Wisconsin right now. And I don't know if we've spent enough time on it because I feel like it was like, oh, is this a veiled threat? We've talked about it some with Dan Schaefer. I did my video for Journal Sentinel on it this week. But it's starting to seem like, oh, they being the GOP and Robin Vos, like, they may actually die on this hill of they are so scared to lose their supermajority by having new maps that they would upend democracy in Wisconsin and not think twice about it.
A really quick question for you, Kristen, as a point of order, can you list all of Justice Janet's crimes? I'd like to know
the crimes and corruption she's done in her 1 month of being in office.
Yes, please. Can you just let the listeners know every egregious thing she's done thus far?
So basically, not a lot.
Oh,
not a lot. She's not. It's not securities fraud. It's not bribery. It's not obstruction of justice.
Is she even having an affair?
She is not, that I know of.
Good Lord.
Don't ask Wisconsin right now, though, because they still are very upset that no one took their claims of her using the N-word very seriously after, they had so many credible sources and when they were trying to get that story to blow up.
Right.
But if you haven't been following this is all over the fact that last January in a forum, when asked about our current maps, she said that they were rigged and that she would enjoy getting to have a new look at them. And From that statement, now there is the accusation that there's no way she can be impartial, and thus she needs to recuse herself. And if she doesn't recuse herself, the GOP lawmakers will impeach her. And as of right now, as of yesterday, so they did file complaints about this, and the Judicial Commission dismisses complaints filed over Janet Protasiewicz's campaign comments. So, but it doesn't really matter, right? Like, they can still go through with this because all they need is a simple majority in the House, which they have,
Let me tell you, they're simple.
and they need a supermajority, 2/3 majority in the Senate, which they have. And that would be to both impeach her and convict her. But here's the rub. Because the fact is, you'd think, all right, well, if they impeach her, then there's no, all Governor Evers can just appoint that person immediately and replace her immediately. Sucks for Janet, but as far as the liberal majority, we move on. But the thing is, there's no requirement for the Senate to conduct a trial. So the House could, and probably would, vote to impeach her. She would be immediately suspended from her duties. And then she would be in like a judicial limbo, sitting there because there would never be a trial in the Senate. And so the court would be stuck at 3-3. And at that point, the only thing that can really happen is, despite the fact that this was like a $50 million campaign and all of the work that she put into actually getting elected and was elected by 11 points, she could step down entirely to open up a spot to then let Governor Evers appoint someone new. But there's so many things about this that are so effed up because, one, clearly the voters didn't have a problem that she said that, right?
Correct.
And furthermore, if this is the tool that they're going to use now, that all they need is a simple majority to basically, like, every time they don't like something, they're just going to put people in these limbos where they get impeached, immediately suspended, but never convicted. And it's just consolidating their power into one legislative branch. Like, I don't, if you are, even if you are a Republican, a conservative, how can you get on board with this?
I think I'm not sure if it was the Bulwark or the Journal Sentinel referred to this as their nuclear option. And that's a very good way of putting it because that has consequences.
Well, and it was the Bulwark specifically that, and Charlie Sykes, who obviously knows Wisconsin politics very, very well, I knows these people very, very well. Like, I was listening to his podcast yesterday, and he was saying, he's like, I know Robin Voss well. Like, and he has always been a smart politician. But this is potential political suicide because
Yeah.
basically what would happen is, if she were to like not recuse herself but step down, whomever Tony Evers would appoint would have to be, he would only, that person would only serve for the rest of this year, and they would have to be up for election in the spring.
Yep.
So we would now have another, we just got through the $50 million most expensive judicial Supreme Court race in the country, in history this year. And we potentially would do it in the spring of 2024 in a presidential election year, where, and this is what Charlie Sykes wrote in his newsletter yesterday, was basically like, where now, on top of what was on the board, what was on the ballot last year, which was largely abortion, but also fair maps
Mhm.
and a slew of other cases. Now you're also adding like democracy
Yep.
and the rule of law.
Yep.
And in a presidential year, and you're once again putting abortion front and center on a losing issue for Republicans. Like, how do they, and this is, I mean, it's all, and the thing that's most craziest to me is, most likely with fair maps, Republicans would still have a majority. Not a huge majority, but they would still have a majority.
Yeah.
And so they are risking and doing, like, they are potentially going to do such a dramatic, potentially catastrophic move that is wildly unprecedented just because they're so scared of losing their super majority. And what does that say? That they know that they're that bad that they could never win without these districts?
Well, it's saying that, and it's also saying if I don't, like at you, as you just said, if I don't get my way, I'm taking my ball and I'm going home. And on the campaign trail next year, it will be you as Wisconsinites voted for Janet. You put her in office by a resounding majority, and now they took it away from you. And they don't believe in Wisconsin, and they don't believe in you as voters, and they don't believe in democracy. That is going to be screamed from the hills for months.
And not only that, and we'll talk about this on the other side of the break, but I mean, if you don't forget that the Democratic Party of Wisconsin has a war chest. And Ben Wickler has been very good at raising money and much better at raising money than the Wisconsin GOP. And we'll talk about it, more details in it, and then after the break, but they've already announced that, like, there was going to be a full-fledged campaign to try to dissuade Republicans from following through on this. And that, like, the amount of ads and organizing that is going to be around this is going to be full force.
Yeah.
So we would love to hear from you on this, but this just feels like it's not that I wasn't taking it seriously, but it's starting to feel like this could actually happen.
Yeah.
And it's way worse than maybe we are even giving it credit for. So 844-967-2789. That's 844-96-PARTY. Shoot us a text, give us a call. We'd love to hear from you on the topic of this wild potential impeachment. This is As Goes Wisconsin. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin. I am Kristen Bry. He is Greg Bach, and we are lamenting, and I think trying to press home how serious this would be if Robin Vos and Republican lawmakers in Wisconsin's legislature actually decide to move forward with impeaching Janet Protasiewicz because she said the maps were rigged on her campaign. Because it basically sets precedent that all you need is a bare partisan majority to remove any judge in any case at any time for any reason. And if you think that they're only going to do that once they've done it once, you are delusional. And so the idea that this isn't, this needs to be a bigger deal. And I know that as of yesterday, Ben Wickler and the Democratic Party of Wisconsin held a press conference. So we'll cover a little bit more of what they said as far as what their $4 million plus blitz to counter this might look like. And we can also talk a little bit more about the Judicial Commission that dismissed complaints over this. I know less about what standing that has over the legislature, if they can just act regardless of that commission. But maybe Joe from Appleton, since he is a lawyer, can let me know. Joe, what say you?
I'm not sure what I'm going to be able to let you know. I'm not sure I have all my thoughts together on this, but I can say that this nuclear option is definitely crossing the Rubicon, so to speak. I know we probably thought, well, they've done that 100 times already, but how can you go back from this? If they were to take away the people's chosen justice and not even give her a chance in the Senate and just keep it in limbo, I mean, how could they possibly come back from this?
I know.
And I actually believe that there are still members of the old guard of the Republican Party still in power, still really driving the ship, but who, if you had showed them 10 years ago what the party would be looking like today, they would be aghast.
Mm-hmm.
But now they're in a position where they either believe they, as a party, would not be able to survive a self-correction to say, oh, wait, let's step back. We're going too far. We're in the wrong here. They either think that they would not survive that politically, or they don't have the power within their own ranks to force a self-correction, that they ceded too much power to the MAGA mind virus to be able to force a self-correction in their party. And the number one rule in MAGA is never take an L, never admit defeat, never be wrong. So they're just going to continue to drive the ship into the iceberg, essentially. And there's going to be, unfortunately, a fair number of people in their party who are okay with that. They would rather have that. They would rather bring the whole thing down if they can drive the ship into the iceberg, if it means that the people on the other side of the ship will drown too. So there's my take.
Oh no, it's a good one. And I have less confidence that there are, because the thing that matters most right now is the stronghold that Robin Vos has over his caucus in the assembly, right? And because that's all they need is to basically impeach her and then hamstring her, right? And so even if they didn't have the votes,
Right.
even if there were still enough senators in the state Senate, Republican senators in the state Senate who are like, this is not a good idea. It's kind of out of their hands as far as their ability to stop this, because they can choose not to convict her. But if they never have a hearing, like if they never move forward with after the impeachment, like what's going on in Texas right now,
Right.
it doesn't matter. And so this is Robin Voss's circus.
Indeed it is. And if it does get to the point where, okay, they vote to impeach her and the Senate doesn't move, I mean, the Dems are going to have to be, unfortunately, pushing Protasiewicz to resign. One, because we got to get somebody else then in her place, and that would happen to, we'd have a replacement at least until next year. But then what's going to be piled up against the Republicans in 24? You got abortion's going to be back on the table.
Mm-hmm.
That was not going to be an issue, but all of a sudden abortion's back on the table, anti-democracy, and most likely they're going to be having, and also on the ticket is a 4-time indicted felon on the presidential ticket.
Yep.
So everything's going to fall apart for them in 24 if they go this route. But I just don't know if they have the ability, as I said, to steer clear of this disaster. I hope to God that there are enough sane minds in there saying, look, we can't do this. It'd be a disaster for our party and for the state in general. But I don't know. Things seem to be getting worse and worse on the other side.
I know.
Can't say.
And they also still don't even have they have one. There's one person who's announced a Republican Senate campaign who is not of the establishment at all. But as far as
right,
and so a backed candidate still hasn't announced, and it is September 6th, folks. So thanks so much for the call, Joe. Always appreciate it. If you have thoughts on the ludicrousy, is that a word?
It is now.
Ludicrousness?
I think it's
ludicrousy. I'm going to look it up at the break.
Ridiculousness.
The insanity of where we are as a state right now, just constantly the political circus that is Wisconsin, and that this is happening in our state. And Robin Vos is willing to put us all through this just so he can hold on to his supermajority. We would love to hear from you. 844-967-2789. That's 844-96-PARTY. And then when we come back, we will have some other good news, some bad news, and another reason not to move to Florida. But we'll also wrap up on this topic, especially with what the Democrats are planning in response. So stay tuned. Give us a call, 844-967-2789, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin. I'm Kristen Bry. Greg Bach is on the board, not on the phone. And we are talking about the escalation of the threat to impeach Janet Protasiewicz. And yesterday, the Democratic Party of Wisconsin and a coalition of unnamed allied groups, at least the DPW, held a press conference and told reporters during the briefing that the party and other groups are going to launch an, quote, intensive, multi-pronged statewide campaign today to make clear to Wisconsin Republicans that an attempt to impeach Janet Protasiewicz would be an absolute political, moral, and constitutional disaster. And so the campaign that's being put forward by DPW and associated groups is trying to basically force GOP lawmakers to, quote, look in the mirror and ask if they're willing to sign a death warrant for democracy in our state. And it's going to include door knocking, phone calls, text messages, digital outreach, and we will see what happens. But I would say, like, if you can consider, don't underestimate the DPW, especially when it comes to statewide organizing. When you look at the scoreboard of statewide elections in Wisconsin since Ben Wickler, specifically since Ben Wickler has become head of the party. And I think this is warranted because I think this is, if you think about what turnout was like, what the final count was with the 11-point difference of how many people for a spring election in a nonpartisan race turned out to vote for Janet Protasiewicz, and that they would dare impeach her before she's even heard a single single case. I don't know what else beyond what we've been talking about since January 6th, 2021, of like not like talking about what it is to just not accept election results. This is that. This is that. All right. I do want to, we have two people on the phone. Let's take Jack from Merrimack first. Jack, are you upset about this as I am?
This is absolutely ridiculous. The arrogance of the Republicans in our legislature seems to know no limits. They've had 13 years of consequence-free actions, inactions, taking a vacation for 3/4 of a year twice out of the last 3 years, and generally speaking, using the people's money as their own personal slush fund in order to do things like bogus investigation. By the way, the Kelly investigation, apparently it's well over $2 million now, and it looks like it's going to escalate even farther. They hire their own Republican attorneys instead of going through the DOJ as they're supposed to do. But here, I think they're going to actually try to do this.
I know.
I think they're going to try to impeach Protasiewicz. And she got more votes than the sum of every single Republican in the stolen legislature. And this would disenfranchise over 1 million Wisconsinites, and that's what this is really about. They can't, they've already bragged about, how they have convinced some people not to vote. They clearly are looking at disenfranchising more people, students. That's partly what this is all about.
That's their playbook.
Yeah. Now I'm wondering, this is at least an abuse of power. I'm wondering if it doesn't rise to the level of obstruction of justice.
And this is where I don't know enough of, like, what are the limitations? Because it just feels like to me, and this is also rings true of when they stripped powers from Governor Evers during the lame duck session when Scott Walker was still in power. It's just consolidating power into their legislative branch instead of having the balance between the three the way it's supposed to be, because of how power hungry they are, and they can't let go. And they don't have any interest in actually responding to the will of the people because, as Jane likes to say, they know best. So thanks for the call, Jack, so much. Moving on to Jim from Fond du Lac. How do you feel about the situation? Jim?
Yeah.
Jim, yeah, we were on air. How do you feel about the situation?
Yeah. What did she end up saying that she wants to impeach her?
What did she say?
Yes.
So what this is all pending on is back in January when it was still a 4-person race and there was a forum. There was the question about the maps as they stand today. And she said she feels like they're rigged and that she would like to have the chance to look at them again, but that she would be impartial if that case were to come before her.
How would she be impartial by
using that language.
But also, I mean, if you remember, Kelly also said that he thought the maps were fine. So how is that any different if he still gave his opinion on what the maps were before he was elected?
It doesn't matter if you're a local judge, the United States Supreme Court judge. You can't prejudge a case without hearing it.
But how are you going to prove that she prejudged the case?
She said it.
But that's not
Did she not say
prejudging the
it?
case. That's asking her personal opinion about the current maps.
How she prejudged it already, though.
How do you
She
prove
should've kept
that?
her mouth shut. She said it.
But how do you prove?
What do
She
you mean, how
also
do you-
said that she thinks that women have the right to choose, and so they're not dying on that hill.
Exactly. She
But this gets into
prejudged
First
the
Amendment
trial.
case. This gets into First Amendment. This is why, and also the Judicial Commission just dismissed all of these complaints.
Yes, but she still spoke it.
Yeah, but so if the commission that is set up to monitor these things is saying this was not a violation of anything, then how are you standing on this?
It is because it's the same as any judge. You go in the jury, yeah, you're a murderer until you hear the evidence. You can't prejudge a trial, a case as a judge. I'm not on either side, but she should have kept her mouth shut.
So then Kelly should have
Then
kept his
there won't
mouth
be
shut
any-
too? So you think we'd be here right now if Kelly would have been elected?
Exactly.
You really think so? You really
Yeah.
think we'd be in the same situation?
Probably.
How do you figure that? How do you not figure that this is completely a partisan political play? Because there would be no ramifications for Kelly because he is on the same side as the majority in the legislature.
That's just my opinion.
Okay. Thanks for the call, Jim.
It's nothing but
Um, we got sorry.
No, I mean,
it's just like it was just like I don't know how else to say. Like if these are the checks and balances that have been put into place, and the commission yesterday said we're dismissing these complaints, saying that she didn't violate anything. I don't know how else to counter your argument that she prejudged it just because you were thinking that she prejudged it.
Well, no, and that's where I'll give Jim some credit too. He said that Kelly shouldn't have said anything shouldn't have said anything as well. Would we be in the same spot? Absolutely not. No, but hey, consistency.
And this is the point that Joe just made that I should have made, but it's like when she was asked a hypothetical question, there was no case, there was no lawsuit, there was no evidence, no filings, no responses. And so when they say I would be impartial once the case is laid out in front of me, and I look at the merits of the case, that is different than being asked a hypothetical situation in a forum. And also, let's not even get into the fact of, don't we have 3 Supreme Court justices sitting right now who said that they respect precedent when they were asked hypothetical questions, and no one
yes.
really cared when they totally flipped on that.
They had their fingers crossed behind their backs. Spicy time.
It's just exhausting. It is exhausting to live in this state sometimes. It's interesting. It's certainly never boring. But as far as being as idealistic as I know that I can be, and just the constant like, oh no, we're not gonna just do that. Like we're gonna continue to find a loophole to slow down any effort to correct course on where we've been for the last 12 years.
12 years.
And it's not about, and it's, at least for me, it's not about Democrats winning. It's about just getting back to fairness, responsiveness, accountability, actually having a cohesive, cooperating government that tries to get things done instead of just winning all the time, like their side wins. And I don't see any way towards that without us getting fair maps and without us having the opportunity to elect politicians who are not in the pocket of certain Bradley Foundation type folks, or just whipped by Robin Voss. Like everything I've ever been told about people who served prior to the changing of the tides in 2010 is that most of the people who had a spine in the Republican Party have left
Oh God.
because they don't want to
yeah.
deal with him. And so it's just a bunch of people who cower to this one man who can have this much power in our state by merely getting 16,000 votes every 2 years. He
Yeah.
represents such a small part of the state and yet wields so much power and influence over all of us. And it is wildly frustrating. And he looks like a ferret. I had to say it.
Well, the popcorn king can't be perfect for everybody, Kristen. All right.
I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm ornery. I'm hormonal and I'm pregnant. Ah.
Yeah, I mean, hey, you're speaking my language on this. I've been frustrated with the man for a long time. I mean, when I worked in local government, without being told, but basically being told, we're not going to give you anything because your city doesn't vote for me. It's insanity.
Yeah.
Like I walked into city government with like the idea I'm a dork. I watched The West Wing, so I'm like, I want to do some good. But we came in on the wave of the Tea Party, and on that Tea Party wave was being captained by Robin Voss.
Man, that must have been because you worked on the Obama campaign in 2008, right?
Correct.
So you went from this unbelievable high of grassroots movements, young people organizing across the country, elect Barack Obama. You want to stay in government. You want to work in local government. You get that job, and then the Tea Party comes in Wisconsin, and it's like, oh, this feels different.
Just running into, I mean, it was like constantly, it was constantly running into a wall, constantly being told no. And with snark too, like just like, no, we're not going to do that. It's not in the cards for you this time. Well, it's never going to be in the cards for us because I worked in a city, and it was, you're right. You go from that overwhelming, like just almost euphoric / utopian thing of watching people who are like, I've never voted for a Democrat before and I'm voting for, I'm like, oh my gosh, the world is changing. And then literally like a year and a half later, I'm like, if I jump off this building, will it kill me or I just break my legs? Because I hate this. I really hate local government. I don't hate the people. It was just so frustrating.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to end on this. Well, Dylan just on the Facebook live stream said, how did we get here? Making the judicial branch political has gotten us into a world of hurt. Totally agree. I wish that judges were actually nonpartisan. I do as well. I mean, this also goes back to, is it a good idea for us to elect judges or not, or justices or not? That's a whole other can of worms that totally. We only have a minute left until break, so we're going to end it there. But this saga is certainly not over, so I'm sure we're going to have more opportunity to complain about it, try to understand it, maybe organize to do something about it. But stick around. This is As Goes Wisconsin. Well, welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin. I am Kristen Bry. He is Greg Bach. And I've taken a breath. And I've also found out that ludicrousy is the noun form of ludicrous. So I was right.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I know that no one said I was wrong, but I
know.
I sometimes when words come out of my mouth, I'm like, did I make that up? Or did I actually read that?
There's always been a word I wanted to make up, or I wanted to catch on. Despision.
Which means?
The amount to which one despises.
Is that a real word?
It's not a real word at all, but that's just me.
Despision. Can you use it in a sentence?
It is, Robin Voss is someone I hold in great despision.
Oh.
It doesn't make sense, but in my head it works.
What would what would a real word synonym be to finish that sentence?
I have a great degree of dislike. Yeah.
I like it. I like what you did there. All right. To end on a higher note.
Yeah.
Instead of a ranty note. Have you been able, well, because the next hour we're going to actually talk about this Spectrum, Charter, Disney kerfuffle. So if you were someone who was affected by Spectrum just going dark with certain channels last week and into this week, and it affecting your ability to watch the US Open or football. We are going to talk about that next hour. And we're specifically going to talk about, like, how do you watch TV now? And is cable dying? Because on top of this fight between Disney and Charter and what that could mean for cable channels, um, broadcast and cable only made up less than 50% of TV usage in July. So, like, less and less people are even consuming their television, the TV that they watch, via cable. And so I'm interested in hearing from people as far as where do they stream, how much do they spend on streaming services compared to what a cable bill would be, and just like where this like messiness of how to consume content through your television looks like for you. But we're doing that at 11:30 in the next hour, and we're going to push our good, bad, and another reason to not move to Florida to the top of the next hour. But for now, were you affected by Spectrum at all and your ability to watch the US Open?
I do not have cable.
Oh, so how do you watch sports when you want to watch sports?
I utilize the ESPN add-on on Hulu.
All right.
So
you're one of those people who only streams.
Only streams. No cable in the household. We only have internet. That's it. There's no point at this juncture because everything we watch that would be on cable or even network is on streaming now.
Yeah.
But I will say this. The amount of money we pay for streaming far outweighs a cable bill every month.
How many different services do you? Well, bank it.
Yeah,
we'll talk about it next hour.
Oh yeah.
Because I want to talk about. I've mostly just watched clips so far. I haven't watched an entire match of the U.S. Open. You've said it's been boring.
It's not, but it's been predictable.
Okay.
I shouldn't say boring. It's just nothing. There hadn't been any great upsets by the time we talked about it, and it's still wonderful to watch. I love watching the U.S. Open. It's one of my highlights of the year. But this year, there's not been like, oh my gosh, an unseeded, booted Daniil Medvedev out of the U.S. Open, which happened a lot the past 2 years. Was just yeah.
But what I have noticed is that there are specifically 4 young, very entertaining Black American players who, I guess, this has actually made history as far as, it's Francis, is it TFO? Is that how you pronounce it?
Francis TFO.
TFO. So Francis TFO and Ben Shelton played yesterday, and it was the first time in 15 years that 2 Black Americans made it to the quarterfinals. And then Shelton ended up winning, so he's now off to the semifinals. And he's now the youngest American man in over 30 years to reach the semifinals. And that was an upset, wasn't it? Wasn't TFO ranked higher?
He was ranked higher, yeah, but people, Shelton's kind of rocketing his way past everybody.
Okay.
So it was like Carlos Alcaraz and Emma Raducanu 2 years ago, where at first you're like, who are these 2 children? And they're just beating everyone. So,
and then Coco Gauff,
who's amazing,
also incredibly entertaining to watch.
Yep.
She's 19. She's the first American teen to reach the U.S. Open semifinals since Serena Williams in 2001.
Yep.
She also has been wildly entertaining to watch. And then Taylor Townsend, who I've really only seen like TikTok clips and like highlights of all these people, but all of them feel very entertaining to watch.
Yeah, I mean they're very entertaining. They're all just full of energy and life and excitement. They love playing. They love being on the court. And going back Saturday, as of Saturday, there were 5 Americans in the round of 16, which was unheard of.
I was gonna say, so that's a pretty high percentage.
That's a high percentage. Usually we're out in like the pre-qualifiers of the pre-qualifiers, and they're like, give an American one, it's fine. But like this year, we have a real showing this year, and it's fantastic to watch.
Is there anything, because it's such an individual sport?
Yeah.
Is there anything like in the water why there's like a new upcoming class of young American tennis players, or is it kind of just random?
I mean, you'd have to talk to an expert about that one. I would just say there's a lot. I think they're with the Williams sisters sort of in the last of their career, moving on, their influence on those younger kids is starting to show. And there's been a real push to get tennis into communities where it normally wasn't, because of, you know, the privilege, because of the cost, and you're seeing kids just able to access this now. And I think you're going to see a new wave of at least young Americans coming through and just dominating, which is going to be amazing to watch. Ben Shelton is fantastic to watch. He's a great player, and his energy is off the charts. Francis TFO is amazing. Like they just bring so much to the table as far as the skill and the entertainment value to watching them perform. I just say perform, honestly. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true.
Well, wasn't that what the German player that Coco Gauff beat was crying about?
Oh yeah.
I meant tennis is, we are entertainers.
Yeah.
And they were so disrespectful to me.
And everyone's like, save it.
All right. Well, when we come back at the top of the hour, we are going to talk about some good headlines, some bad headlines, and another reason you should not move to Florida. And then at the second half of the hour at 11:30, how do you watch your TV these days? We would love to hear from you. But for now, we're taking a break for the top of the hour news. This is As Goes Wisconsin. Stay tuned.